Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Learn with Jason. Today on the show, we are going to dig into something that has been, it feels like all that anybody ever talks about these days, AI. And we're going to dig into maybe a hot take. I don't even know if this is a hot take. I feel like I've been struggling with where AI fits into the landscape for developers, right? I don't think it's going to take our jobs. I don't think it's going to replace us. But I do think it's here to stay, and I do think that it's here in a meaningful way. But I still haven't quite figured out what that means. So I wanted to talk to somebody who can help me sort of navigate the way that I'm feeling about AI. And to do that, I wanted to bring on my friend, Laurie Voss. Laurie, how you doing?
Hello, I'm doing great, thanks.
I'm super happy to have you here, and I have about 9 million questions for you. But before we get started, can I ask you, for folks who aren't familiar with you and your work, to give us a bit of a background?
Sure. I identify primarily as a web developer. I've been a web developer for 27 years now, which means I have like blog posts that are older than some people's entire careers. Um, uh, for a while there, I was co-founder of NPM Inc., which is how a lot of people in the JavaScript world know me. And now I head up developer relations at a company called Llama Index, which is a framework for building generative AI applications.
Excellent. So I find this whole space to be sort of it's interesting to me because the more I learn about it, the more I realize that a lot of my fears were maybe unfounded. But I find it to be very opaque. It seems like a lot of stuff is happening that is either wrapped up in hype, like this is going to take our jobs, it's going to replace developers, humans will be obsolete, the super intelligence is coming, or it's so densely academic that I can't really parse it, right? And so I think maybe it's just me, but I feel like a lot of us are sort of watching this happen and still sort of unsure how it fits into reality. So not the hypey like it's all over, but the more real, like how does this settle into everyday life,
Mhm.
and what that means from an AI standpoint. And so, as somebody who's sort of came from the web dev world and has now transitioned into the AI like LLM management space, what's your take on this?
Um, I mean, obviously, I have a lot of feelings about it. Uh, I agree mostly with you about the hype train. The hype train is AI's biggest enemy at the moment.
Mm,
People are right at the top of that Gartner curve of hype, where they're like, "Yeah, this is gonna, it's gonna take over the world, and we should have serious, like, we've had serious international conferences about like whether or not AI is going to like kill everyone and whether or not that's good." And I'm like,
and
hold on,
whether or not
it
that's good.
it's it's not there yet. It can't count the number of R's in strawberry. Like that was a big advance recently, was that we could count the number of R's in the word strawberry. It's not self-replicating gray goo yet. Um, but one of the things that it's particularly good at is code. And we should zoom
Mm,
out a little bit, right? Like LLMs are autocomplete. They are autocomplete on steroids. So you've given them a huge corpus of everything that they could find on the internet and said, okay, given that you've seen all of this stuff before, you can now autocomplete when you see something that looks similar. And it turns out that if you do that at large enough scale, it begins to look like reasoning. Like there's debates
mhm.
about like, you know, can computers think of blah 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 blah. The problem is like the gold standard for AI stuff for a long time has been the Turing test. The Turing test is like, can a human operator tell that it is talking to a computer when when it can't see that the operator is talking to a computer. And the Turing test is way in the rear view at this point. Like you cannot
Right.
tell uh, that this code was written or that this language was written by an AI half of the time. Um, uh, but the reason it's so good as code is because the training data is full of code, right? Like it's looked at the entire internet and like it's reading these web pages to like get autocomplete about the content of the web page, but it's also reading a web page, right? It's reading a
Right,
pile
right.
of HTML and JavaScript, and so they've just been extraordinarily overtrained on code in general and web code in particular. So they're really, really good at generating web code at this point. One of the things about them, about their training data, is that it is full of like extant web code. So they're not going to be good at the latest and greatest thing, right? They're not going to be good at this framework you just invented yesterday because it's never seen that framework before. As we're going to see today, I hope, one of the things that you have to correct for when you're coding with an AI assist is you have to keep telling it to use newer stuff. Like, don't do it the old way, do it the new way.
Mm,
Um, because it just has a lot more training data of how to do it the old way. Um,
that makes a lot of sense, actually. Yeah, because it's ultimately like I think the argument that I've heard and the one that's sort of stuck in my brain is that it's very much a pattern matching machine, and what it's doing is it's using the sum of its training data to basically assign a probability to what the next thing in the chain would be. And so what you just said about like using old data makes a lot of sense because based on what it's read on the internet, most of the code is old. And so the probability that it would use older code seems much higher because it would be
right,
like, well, yeah, most of it's done that way.
right. But
Okay.
uh, but one of the ways that that's good is that it tends to gravitate towards, um, I don't know if I'd call it best practice, but standard practice, right? Like
Sure.
it does by default what everybody else is doing, uh, because that is the majority of the stuff that it gets trained on. Um, and like as a coding assistant, I think I was telling you about this when we were discussing coming on the show. Um, it's really unlocked recreational coding for me again. Like I'd kind of
Hmm.
stopped building stuff on weekends for a long time, because every time I wanted to get started, I was like, oh, I have to figure out how this framework does auth now, and have to figure out how this particular web API works these days, and just a whole bunch of stuff that uh, is boilerplate that is not the problem that I was trying to solve. And an AI assistant just gets that out of the way. You can just be like, build me something that looks kind of like this, and it builds you that, and then you can start iterating on that, and it just gets you the first 50% of the way
Hmm.
instantly, um, which means that I can focus on the thing that I was excited about working on.
And that is, I think, a good point because in that case, a lot of the concerns that I have about AI generated code kind of fall to the wayside because if what you're trying to do is experiment with an idea, learn something new, try out a new, a new workflow or thought or platform or whatever, um, there's a lot of boilerplate that gets in the way. And the way that we used to solve that is we would go look for a starter repo we would use and an npm create whatever thing, and it's a template that installs a bunch of boilerplate for us. Uh, and the benefit of that is we didn't have to think about what that other stuff was. We just got to work on the thing that we wanted to build. Right when we npm create vite at latest, we're just kind of eliminating the needs to think about ssr and hot reloading and what the development environment looks like and all those things that used to be a huge amount of the work that we did when we were setting up new projects. So from that standpoint, I totally get this argument because now it's not I have to go hunt down the right starter template and what if it doesn't exist? Well, then I'm hosed or I have to customize something that's similar. Now I can just say, give me a starter template for thing and it just does it, right? And that's pretty compelling. Um,
Right.
when you talk, so one of the big concerns that I do have about this is what happens as this code ages, right? And depending on who you talk to, like there's been reports that say that AI is making us way faster. There's reports that say AI is making us way slower at coding. Um, have you seen any large code bases that have had significant AI usage and actually seen firsthand results, or because I'm only going off secondhand reporting?
Sure. I mean, there is Llama Index. Llama Index is a framework for building Gen AI applications, but
Hmm.
you know, it's created by a company that is full of LLM enthusiasts. So an enormous amount of LLM usage goes into writing the framework itself, and the framework itself is pretty big at this point. Um, we find Logan, who is our head of open source, he loves using LLMs for refactors. He'll be like, okay, so I wrote this 6 months ago. It's obviously garbage now. Uh, let's restructure this so that I can add new methods that do this new thing. And you just feed in an entire function body uh, to the LLM, and it will refactor the code uh, to make it more expandable. Like that's a thing. Refactors are a thing that they're extremely good at because there's no net new thinking at all. It's just
Mm.
rephrase this existing thing so that it's tidier, and we use that all the time. Um,
Okay.
the framework, um, the pitfall of a large code base can be if you have like a very specific house style, or you have like a lot of internal APIs, the LLM isn't going to know about that stuff. But there are tools to do that. The name of the biggest one is, of course, escaping me right now. I will think of it in 5 minutes and then blurt it out. But basically, there are tools that read your entire company's code base and enhance your LLM assistant with knowledge of your house style and your existing APIs and all of that kind of stuff.
And that's if I remember correctly, that's the promise of tools like Cursor, right? Is that they're sort of aware of your actual code. They're not just drawing on like the whole body of, although they are drawing on the whole body of code they've studied from the internet, but that they
Mhm.
prioritize your code. Is that how that works?
Cursor is doing that on. I'm not 100% sure of the exact level of scale that Cursor works
Sure,
at.
sure, sure.
It's definitely aware of the other files in my repo when I'm working in a repo. Like it will refer to APIs that I haven't told it about explicitly, so it knows about the other files. Um, the tools that I'm thinking about do something much deeper. They will inhale like all of the code at your enterprise and keep it and like
Oh, yeah,
fine tune.
stuff like source graph.
Sourcegraph is exactly the company I was thinking of
Okay,
and couldn't
okay.
remember the name.
Yeah. And because their promise is that they don't just look at the current repo, they will look at every repo in your private GitHub org, and they purport to be able to understand how those different repos fit together and where the interdependencies are so that you can do not just like repo refactors, but like in org-wide all code refactors is the way that I've seen people talk about it. I've never been at a company large enough to use SourceGraph, so I've never seen
Yeah,
it in action, but it sounds pretty cool from what I've heard.
yeah. The other speaking of refactors, um, the other use case I've heard a whole bunch about for LLMs is upgrading large legacy code bases from like one version of Java to the next version of Java. Um, I've been told
Interesting.
by some of our mutual friends at Google, I'm sure you can think who they are, um, that Google has gigantic legacy Java code bases, and they have saved thousands upon thousands of person hours by turning the task of upgrading old repos from we have to hire an intern and the intern has to like very laboriously manually change every single old API to the new API to
Mm-hmm.
we point the LLM at it, say switch it from Java 14 to Java 17 or whatever. I don't know the current versions of Java. Um, and it just does that. And then it's somebody's job to like review the PR instead, which is much faster.
Right. And that's, I think that might be getting at that one seems very reasonable, right? Like it's not fun to do an upgrade of legacy code to like the next version of the legacy code. And that almost always leads to somebody wanting to not just upgrade, but start to refactor. And then when you get into refactors, then there's scope creep. And like, I used to work at IBM. I know how this happens. And a quick project turns into, 900 months of, of like back and forth. And we're just going to rebuild the whole thing.
Yeah.
So letting a bot do that feels like a good way to stay focused. Like bots don't get bored. They don't have opinions about whether or not the work is below them. But then
Right.
the
And
review
that's
does put an interesting onus on people to, again, like not get bored, not, that is a
Yeah.
challenge.
I mean, if the code has unit tests, then as long as the tests pass, you're probably fine. One of the other things that you can get an LLM to do is you can point it at the old code base, say write the unit tests, and it'll say, okay, I know how to write tests for things. I will just generate a whole bunch of machine generated tests that make sure that this code works the way that it says that it works. And then when you point the LLM at the code and say upgrade it, you can use the tests that it generated previously to make sure that it's not breaking anything when it does the upgrade.
That's a
Like,
pretty cool way to think about this stuff too.
yeah, all of the best uses of LLM and Gen AI in general are uh, are getting it to do boring stuff. That was my thesis for coming on the show, right? Was like, it's not good at creative work. Don't ask it to write your thesis for you because it's not going to know what the hell you wanted to write. It's not going to have any original ideas, but it's very, very good at summarizing and rephrasing. And in the language of code, that works down to like refactoring or, generating boilerplate.
Right. And this, I think, is maybe the crux of why AI doesn't scare me, and why I'm not worried about my job or about the industry. I think that the only jobs that are threatened by LLMs are jobs that were sort of designed to automate themselves out of existence. If the only thing you do is move code from one existing code base to another existing code base, or if there's no like generative thought happening in your job, then your job is always at risk. Like whether that's because they find a cheaper contractor and they offshore it, or whether that's because we outsource it to an LLM. You are always, if you're not like doing the human part of the project, which is thinking about problems, understanding context, thinking about how to expand or improve or otherwise alter in novel ways, then the value. And I don't want to get into like a philosophical thing about what it is to be human, but I guess like this is the danger of any of these, right? It starts to tip down that path. But I do think there's something to be said about like if what you're doing is generating anything novel, AI is not coming for you, at least not for presumably quite a while, given the sort of difficulty we're seeing getting past the current plateau of like anything generative, like generative that isn't basically word salad, right? Because again, it can only do pattern matching based on information that's in the model, right? So
Yeah.
so yeah, so then I think like actually this is a really good question that Robert just asked, that is a little bit of a tangent, but yeah. So what are your thoughts on AI being a snake that will eat its own tail? So as more people use AI to create content, AI continues to train on AI generated data, and the one that I saw, somebody described that as like it's sort of like a downward spiral where it gets increasingly more incomprehensible because it's machines talking to machines.
Um, I am not qualified to talk about the ML implications of training on machines on machines. Um, I know that one of the things that um, we've discovered recently with training LLMs is that synthetic data that is explicitly generated for the purposes of training LLMs works quite well.
Hmm.
Um, it doesn't make things worse; it makes things better. Um, I think there is this. I forget the technical name for it. There is this pattern of if you endlessly train the data on itself, it will go into this spiral and destroy itself. Um, but uh, the machines are relatively good at detecting when that's happening to them. So you can just say, okay, this data created a downward spiral in the training set. We can just undo that. We can just be like, no, go back to how you were 3 versions ago, and we'll throw away that new data. So I
Got
don't
it.
think it's
Yeah.
like some existential threat to how LLMs work. I do think like as a user of the internet, there being a bunch of like AI generated slop on the internet now is really annoying.
It
Um,
is, yeah.
and
That kind of does pull us back to the core thesis of what we're talking about, which is like, I'm not offended by AI, but I am offended when somebody tries to pretend the AI is doing creative things. Like if somebody try and okay, this is where I'm going to get spicy, but like if somebody tries to pass off an AI generated text as being like great storytelling that they didn't edit at all. They're just like AI generate a story, and then they put, and it's like, yeah, I can tell that that's like that. It's all derivative stuff because that's the nature of AI. When somebody uses the image generation and they're like, look at my beautiful art, I'm like, it's an AI image. Like it's not. I'm not feeling anything, right? But I love it when it's used as a part of the process. So, for example, like I've done several projects where I was trying to think of something and I wanted to get out of a rut. So I had AI generate, give me a list of 15 like funny app ideas. And it doesn't give me anything that I really like, but it helps me get a few more threads to tug at so that I can get out of the like local maximum I was at. And
yeah,
then similarly with images, like if I'm trying to think of something to draw, but I'm like locked on one thing, I say, all
mhm.
right, give me 15 images of like this kind of fantastical thing. It'll do something I've never thought of before, and then I can use that as like information to draw the thing I wanted to draw.
Yeah, I mean, those are uses of that go beyond what I do with AI. I'm very much like using it to transform existing stuff. I find it's very bad at like blank sheet of paper stuff. If I'm
Right.
like the one the one thing I've used as blank AI blank sheet of paper stuff was somebody asked me to when I first got hired at Llama Index, what should my 90-day plan should be, and I was like, what would the 90-day plan for a head of developer relations look like? Just write me one of those, and it wrote me like this 15-point plan, and I was like, great, that's obviously what I'm going to do.
Right. None of us are going to look at this again after I turn this in. So why don't
I'm a year into my job now, and I feel like I'm relatively competent at it. So when my boss sees this recording and he's like, "That was AI," I'll be like, "Fooled ya."
I was just showing you that I know how to use the tools, boss.
Exactly.
And there is a question that I do want to address because I don't want to just like fly past it. But so Glitch is saying that some of us have already been let go because of AI, and an ex-manager fired an entire team because he believed the AI would replace us anyways. So what about the hundreds of us that have already lost our positions because of management who don't understand what an LLM is or how an LLM is best utilized? I'm going to just preemptively say the principal cause of pain in this industry is people being generally terrible at understanding problems and progress. Um, that is not a new thing with AI. Like I've seen people get laid off for the silliest reasons because some manager read a report somewhere and like panicked or decided that everything was different. And AI, I think, is maybe better at tricking people than some of the other technologies, but I do think that it's worth acknowledging that yes, it is happening. I do not think that it's sustainable, and I do think we're seeing like a lot of those jobs that people just eliminated over the last few years. They're starting to pop up on job boards again because they're realizing that, oh, it turns out for a company to function, you need people who can do the work. Um,
Yeah, there's there's a bunch of ways I could go with that. Um, the first is that we are in a weird economic time. We were at zero interest rates for a long time, and we had the pandemic caused this like explosion in hiring. And so there are a lot of layoffs now where AI is an excuse rather than a reason. Um, People are just like, Wall Street would like me to lay off a bunch of people, and that will boost my stock price. Um, so there's a lot of jobs being lost to AI. They're not actually being lost to AI. They're just jobs that are being lost because companies are short sighted and stupid.
do you
Um,
want to hear my hottest take that I'll say on camera?
sure.
I'm actually somewhat convinced that a lot of these layoffs were because during the pandemic, companies feel like they lost leverage over their workers, and the layoffs are a reassertion of dominance and reminding workers that we need jobs, and they wanted to turn it back from a buyer's market to a seller's market.
I mean, it's true, although I don't know. If people were doing it just for that reason, you'd think the people who hung on to their employees would have like uh, this startling advantage, right? They'd be like, I didn't fire all of my employees for no reason. Therefore, my company is doing a lot better. Um, so I guess we'll see how that shakes out, like whether or not the people who did the herd layoffs like do any better than the people who just hung on to their employees and were like, no, we're going to continue to treat you well. Let's see how that goes. I think
Hmm.
you and I both agree how that's going to go. But um, the broader point to that question um, gets into philosophy a little bit, which is like it's like the creative destruction that accompanies um, any boost in productivity, right? You know, imagine like the famous one is um, the Luddites of I think the 17th century, whose
Hmm.
objection was to uh, mechanical looms for weaving cloth versus versus hand weaving cloth, and they were simultaneously right and wrong. Their objection was that this is going to generate a whole bunch of shitty cloth generated by crappy machines that is not as good as the cloth generated by humans. And that was true. And that is the
Hmm.
same thing that's happening right now. But also, it turns out having a bunch of really cheap cloth means that a bunch of people who couldn't afford clothing before can afford clothing now. And like that's a net good for society is that a bunch of people who were naked are clothed now.
Sure.
Like and a bunch of people who previously were doing very expensive tailoring for rich people can now do like clothing for the masses, and everybody's life gets better. Like productivity advances will cost people some jobs, but they always create more jobs than are lost in the long term. That doesn't mean it doesn't suck to get laid off. That doesn't mean I'm expecting you to feel happy about the fact that you got laid off because your job got automated away. Um, but like the solace is that like net more people are going to get jobs doing stuff that was previously uneconomical to do because of the vast productivity increases. Like I said that this is unlocking like weekend coding for me. It's because I'm going much faster, right? I'm
Mm.
developing a lot faster than I used to. And that is like an obvious measurable productivity increase for me personally. And that is being multiplied by millions and millions of devs across the industry right now. Like we're all going to code a whole lot faster because we're getting this assist. And that is going
And
to
I
unlock things that we couldn't do before, stuff that, companies that would have been too hard to do or too labor intensive to do.
and that's a good question, or a good point, because if you take it in that light, and it's sort of like every advancement always has a fairly painful turnover. The Industrial Revolution was effectively a bloodbath of one type of job, and then a huge creation of another type of job that we'd never really seen before. Um, and so AI likely, I think you're probably right. It has kind of a similar thing. But one parallel that I just thought of is at the beginning of the internet, right? There were a bunch of people saying, it's a fad, it's not going to last, it's no utility, it kind of sucks. Like, why worry about this? But it also created this ability for people who had never had the leverage to start a business. They didn't have the startup capital to, get a brick and mortar store, to build up inventory, to manage all the things that you need to manage to be able to like do a thing in real life. They could suddenly start businesses online. And we saw this sort of like new explosion of different business models and things that could be done that weren't really feasible in other ways. And we also saw, some pretty tragic losses of things that used to be really normal are pretty rare now.
Yeah, like
And
I always think about like travel agents. Remember travel agents? Remember when like the
do.
way that you used to book a vacation was you'd go to a physical office and an actual human would be like, I'm going to book these flights for you and I'm going to tell you where your hotel should be and stuff like that. And now like everybody does that online. I don't think anybody is like wistful for the days of travel agents, but that was like a whole industry that got destroyed by the early internet.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and now, right, we we have the advancement in technology on the internet has gotten to the point where it's becoming less feasible for a small business to easily get online and build something unique, right? Like they can get Wix or Squarespace or one of the sort of like templating engines. They can maybe get WordPress, but it's becoming less like it feels like in the 90s you could find somebody who would build you a website that was like the kid down the street for a couple $100. And I know that to be true because I was the kid down the street for a couple $100 who build you a website. And I'm finding less like I don't know as many people who are trying to do that anymore. My neighbors all have kids that are in their teens and getting into their early 20s, and like this is not what they're not focused on, like building businesses or building websites for small businesses or like starting little startups. They're thinking about other stuff because it all feels too unapproachable to build something that's competitive in today's market. Like who's going to stop Amazon from setting up a drop shipping thing and just, killing whatever e-commerce business you do, or who's going to stop Etsy from selling the thing that you want to sell? Like there's a lot of ways that compete. Who's going to stop Resy or OpenTable or any of these restaurant sites, or Instagram from becoming the way that restaurant sites run now, which is my least favorite development of the food scene. But like all of those things have sort of removed the pressure to get a small website. But AI, now you can kind of say like, hey, can I have a website that's for my restaurant? And it'll give you one. And it might not be perfect, but it's pretty good. And it's not $6,000 or a $50 monthly retainer or whatever the things are that you would have to pay today, that just didn't exist 10, 15 years ago, right? So I do think that it's sort of giving leverage back to a group of people who are maybe running out of any sort of leverage. And I don't know, that is looking at it that way, that is kind of exciting because we get to see what people do when they get access to tools and capabilities that they didn't have a few years ago.
The buzzword I've heard is personal software. When it becomes, when the cost of writing software begins to drop to zero, the number of users of a piece of software that you need to make it a viable piece of software to write begins to approach one, right? Like if I need a piece of software that does this, I no longer have to sweat about whether or not like there's a viable market for it. I can just churn it out and be like, cool, now I've got this. Like I have a number of pieces of personal software like that already, right? Like I have an app whose only purpose is to like post what time the sun set.
I know this account.
Yeah. That's a whole app. There's like a whole website with a domain and stuff, and nobody uses it except me. I'm the only user of this piece of software, and that's what it does. Is it posts to Twitter and to Mastodon what time the sun set during daylight savings, so that you can find out how much more sunlight there was every day as the days begin to get longer again. Because I find that so depressing.
Sure.
So personal software is a thing that can happen. I've also met a Llama Index user actually, who he was a domain expert in medical records. That was the thing that he knew about, and he wanted a startup. And instead of hiring like a team of contractors, he just has been brute forcing this with LLM assistance. He has no coding background whatsoever, but he knows exactly what he wants this piece of software to do. And he has just been hammering at coding assistants going, right, make it do this. Now make it do this. Now make it do this. Add this feature. And like, it only works for him like half of the time, but he has managed to bootstrap like a successful startup that makes it easier for doctors to read medical records on the basis of no coding knowledge whatsoever.
That's kind of fascinating, and I do think points to what I was talking about earlier, which is like if we want to remain valuable, the point isn't to become like the best at coding. It's to have like novel thoughts and to be able to sort of see connections and see opportunities and describe problems and describe outcomes. That's always been a killer skill set. And it just seems like it's going to become more important than ever, especially as some of the harder skill sets are being abstracted over. And we can get grumpy about that if we want, but we can also just embrace that like even if we're completely wrong, let's say this AI thing blows up tomorrow and it all falls apart, and we decide, you know what, that was a mistake. Let's just turn off all the GPUs. Um, Learning how to be a better communicator, both to yourself of your ideas, how to fit together ideas. It does not matter what industry you're in. It does not matter what tools you're using. That will 1000% be a huge accelerant for your career, your relationships, everything. Like it's a no lose game to get better at that. So hey, why not hedge?
Sure.
Okay, so I'm looking at the time and I realize I would easily talk about this for the rest of today, but I do want to look at some code because we're doing things a little differently today, and I'm really excited about it, and I want to make sure that we have plenty of time for that. So let me switch us over into the pair programming view here. And before I get started, I just want to drop a quick shout out. If you are not following Laurie on social, it's at Celdo everywhere, right?
Yeah.
And we are today having live captioning done by Vanessa from White Coat Captioning. Thank you so much, Vanessa, for being here. That is made possible through the support of Netlify. So thank you so much, Netlify, for doing that. And today we are pair programming using Tuple, which gives us a bunch of controls. You'll kind of see them as we work through, but it's good stuff. So thank you, Tuple, for supporting the show as well. And with that, I'm going to switch over to the Tuple window where we are now looking at Laurie's computer. And so today Laurie's going to drive, and I'm going to just stand here and be interested.
That's what we're going to try and do. Yeah. So the challenge that you gave me, I think, was you've got this little API of yours that gets data about all of the episodes of Learn with Jason that have ever happened. And it links to every YouTube video that you've created, and there are resources in the show notes for each show of like stuff that you've linked to. But what you told me was that you talk about other stuff in the body of the show. Like you talk about resources, you talk about things that you could point at, and those don't always make it into the show notes.
Right.
So let's see if we can do, a thing that AI is good at, summarizing. And let's get the LLM to read the YouTube transcripts and find all of the resources that you mentioned that are not already mentioned in the show notes so that we can add them to the show notes. And if we're getting really fancy, if it works out, we'll also provide links to where in the episode you mentioned that resource, so you can link people directly to. And this is where we started talking about this, and this is where we started talking about that.
Right, and this is one of those things that it's I vaguely know how I would attempt to approach this without an LLM for the language processing, and I know I've tried things like this before, and it is extremely difficult. It's extremely rickety. It almost always has false positives and false negatives. And so I'm very interested to see what the quality bump is in trying this kind of natural language processing with an LLM.
Cool.
And I have a hunch it's going to be a lot better.
Well, let's see. I confess, because I was nervous about whether or not this would work. I have already tried this out. You can see in backend test. I've tried it out and it did work. I did manage to produce something, but
and
I'm
that's
not
good
going
because
to...
I talked at you for like 40 solid minutes. So if we need to jump to the end and show a working product, that's great.
Yeah, I'm not going to refer to it unless I absolutely panic. But the other thing that I wanted this session to show was like, this is Cursor. This is the AI-enabled VS Code clone. And I want to show how you use an AI assistant effectively. Like that was one of the reasons that I said I'll drive instead of you're driving, is like, let me show you how somebody who's using this every day uses it. So you get a sense of like, what does AI-enabled coding look like?
Yeah. Somebody's asking, is Cursor going to use the context of backend test?
That is an excellent question. It might, do you want me to move it out of the way so that it doesn't do that?
I don't have strong feelings about this. I'm not particularly worried about like the
I don't,
specifics of this. I'm
I
more
think
interested in the flow.
I think even if it does, it won't make that much difference because it's not honestly that complicated a piece of code that we're talking about. It's something that we can get done in 30 minutes. So,
And a thing that I'm also interested in, one of the main reasons I was excited for Laurie to drive here is because I feel like I keep trying and failing to integrate LLMs into my coding flow, because probably due to my own habits, right? The way that I write code, I find the coding flow to be so interruptive with an LLM agent. And it like takes me out of the flow, and I haven't found a way to actually integrate it where I feel like I'm more productive. I feel like I'm sort of battling the tools whenever they're on. So I'm really interested to see how, like you said, somebody who uses this every day, the way that you interact with this and how it fits into your flow.
yeah, I think Copilot in particular, I get annoyed at Copilot sometimes. It keeps like tabbing
Mhm.
stuff in when I'm like, I'm not ready for you. Hold up, I am not doing that. Cursor works a little bit differently. Um, so let's just get started and see how things go, shall we?
Let's do it.
Um, so this is our base. We've got it's already telling me what I've done wrong. It's like if you can't just put things in there. Um, it's just doing exactly what I would do, right? Like it's already figured out this is what you were gonna do, right? Uh, you were gonna run the code and see uh, what the API is spitting out.
Sure.
Uh, oops. Do. What? Cannot find
Are we in
module.
the right folder?
No, probably not. Yeah, there we go. Thank you. If I was being really lazy, I could have just pasted that into the thingy, and it would have, and it would have said, "Are you in the right folder?" But you're even better than an AI. There you go. My highest praise. So this is what this is what we're working with.
We're getting asked if you could zoom in just a little bit. Maybe give it a couple taps on Command Plus.
Yeah, how's that?
That looks great. And then they've asked if you can go full screen so that we can see just a little bit more what's going on.
Sure.
Wonderful. Thank you.
Yeah. So this is the data structure we're working with. Um, we've got an ID, we've got the slug, we've got the hosts information, we've got the YouTube, which includes the URI of the YouTube links. That's going to be the interesting part for us. It's also got the ID, which is super helpful. And that's the thing that we're primarily going to want. So let's first just get one episode and one transcript. So this is where we pop up the chat and we're like, this is where you start talking to the AI like it's an actual person, like it's your intern. All right, so I've got an API that returns an object that contains a YouTube URI, a YouTube video ID at I think it was video ID. Let's go back. YouTube ID. Oh, was it video?
No, it's ID. You're right.
YouTube ID. It returns an array of objects that contain a YouTube video ID at object. Let's fetch the full array, sort it by date, which is at date. So we get the most recent episode, and then fetch the YouTube transcript for that video ID. Go.
Okay.
So
All right.
it's talking to me. Let's use the get sorted episodes function. Now let's use this function to extract the most recent episode. Putting it all together, here's the complete code to achieve what you're looking for. It's already figured out about YouTube transcripts, which is a relatively well-known, it turns out, NPM package to do this stuff for you. And what I'm just going to do is I'm just going to hit apply. It's going to think for a second. Yeah, apply that. And it gives me a diff that I can look at. And the moment the diff is the whole fucking thing.
I like the diff though. That I'll be honest, this is the first time I've actually seen Cursor. I hear everybody talk about it, but never looked at it.
Yeah, no, it's great. It's much better than like copying and pasting from a Claude window or having having tab completion everywhere. It gives you a diff of this is what I've changed. And the answer is it has changed basically everything, but I'm just going to accept that diff. So it's imported .env and YouTube transcripts. So let's make sure it's got those. It doesn't run npm install for me. I have to do that myself.
Sure. Did it update your? Oh, right. It doesn't update your package JSON.
It doesn't. Yeah, there's no package JSON at all. So it wasn't working with that. It was just assuming that I would do that for it.
Got it. Okay.
So get sorted episodes. There's a sort function there, date versus date. That looks like a reasonable function to do that. It's producing an async function main. There's the sorted episodes, total episodes, most recent episode, title and date. Oh, does it know about title?
Looks like I figured it out. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
It probably made an assumption would be my guess because that's a pretty common field.
Then it extracts the most recent episode, fetches the transcripts, and then it outputs the transcript. So yeah, that looks like a pretty reasonable first try.
And it got close, but I can see a couple things where like it, for example, it split the URI instead of using the YouTube ID.
That's true.
So there's a couple pieces where it like it got there. But
the funny thing is that exists, right? The URI exists.
It does exist, which is kind of fascinating.
I think whatever viewer it was, it said that it's probably reading the stuff in backend test is correct, because otherwise, how did it know about URI? Let's run this and see what we get, because that's how I code. So I'm just like, all right, excellent. Cool.
Look at that go. Okay, so this YouTube transcript thing is kind of worth the price of admission because I didn't know you could just do that.
Yeah.
I definitely have an endpoint where you can get the full transcript, but it's not time coded.
Yeah, no, it's this is just a feature of the YouTube API, it turns out. I use it all the time because I'm posting to social media as part of my job. And I often get videos and I'm like, what is this video about? I don't have time to watch a 30-minute video. I just paste the transcript into Claude and be like, tell me what this video is about in like 5 bullet points. And that's what I post to social media.
Well, and not to flex here, but I'm going to flex because this is one of the main reasons that I love having a human captioner and why I'm so happy that Vanessa's here. And I've been with Whitecoat for years at this point now, is because not only do we have this transcript, but we also know that the transcript is accurate. And like the Whitecoat captioning team knows technical terms, so they spell things right. It's not like the inferred sort of correct transcription.
Yeah.
This is like legit, like brand names are spelled right and stuff. So this should be, I'm really excited about this. This is actually, you're talking about personal software. This is about to be personal software for me.
All right, so we've got that. Now, what is the next thing? Like the hardest thing when you're working with LLMs is just remembering what it is that you wanted to do next. All right, so we've got the transcript. Let's say, oh right, the other thing that's inside of your output is the
Resources.
Resources. Thank you. So let's first console.log that most recent episode. Thank you. And don't console.log the transcript. Just give me that thing, please. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this and I'm just going to do what I always do in this situation, which is ref.json. Like, it's just a reminder of what the structure is that I'm working in, so I don't have to keep going back to it. Okay, so you've got a thing called links, and in the links you've got resources. All right, so now I guess the next thing is to get the LLM involved.
Okay.
So so I've highlighted the whole thing. I don't actually think you need to do that, but it's just what I do. And I've hit Command K because what I'm asking for is a refactor.
Okay.
Change this so that main is a function called fetch most recent transcript, and it returns the transcript. And it thinks about that, and it runs through each line of code, and it's like, what do I need to do to get that done? Not very much. Cool.
Okay, that was dope.
All right, so now we've got fetch most recent transcript. And we're in MJS, so I can just do top level awaits, which is nice. So that transcript, thank you. That is exactly what I was going to do. All right, that transcript equals await most recent transcripts. Now bring in llama index using Claude 3.5. And pass the transcript to llm.complete. Now this is tricky because I don't know that it knows llama index well enough to be able to do that. Llama index is not, all right, it's done it wrong. It's bringing in OpenAI, right. And it's bringing it in from the wrong place. Oh no, this is it trying to do a RAG pipeline, because that's the most common thing that you do with llama index is you put together a RAG pipeline. Do you know what a RAG pipeline is?
I feel like it's a word I've heard, but I don't know it well enough. And yeah, why don't we quickly define that?
Yeah, so a RAG is retrieval augmented generation. So that is, if you want to answer a question about a body of text, you store all of your text in a vector store, and then you run a query that fetches the most semantically relevant bits of all of that data that you stored in a vector store, and feeds that back. So if you had 10,000 documents and you're like, what is the capital of South Dakota? It would find the two documents that are about South Dakota and feed those back to the LLM and say, here's two relevant documents and a query. Answer the question.
Oh, okay, yeah. So I did not realize that's what it was called, but yeah, I did a whole episode of Web Dev Challenge on that, where we were loading stuff into vector stores and then using that as our query thing. So yeah, hey, I've built a RAG.
Excellent. All right. So instead, let's bring it in manually. Let's import Anthropic from Llama Index. And I'll just go and install it.
Okay, so this is making me feel better as you're sort of stepping through this process, where my struggle has been that I just kind of assumed that if it wasn't working that I was doing it wrong. But seeing that you're kind of like, yeah, well, try it in the bot, and if it screws up, then just do it the way you know how, and then you just kind of keep.
I knew I was getting out on a limb there by asking it to do something with Llama Index, which is not like the world's most famous library, and also I was kind of vague about what I wanted. All right, so now we've got Anthropic. We've got a transcript. Let's say this. So this is the other way that you can do stuff. So notice that it's trying to guess what I'm going to do next, even to the point of auto-completing what my comments are going to be, which I wish it wouldn't do. The comments are how I tell you what I'm going to create. You fill in the code. Don't tell me what I'm going to do next. Anyway, instantiate the Llama Index client with Anthropic Claude 3.5 Sonnet model. Fine. There we go. Process.env Anthropic API key. That's probably right. Let's see. LLM.complete. Are you there, Claude? As I recall, we have to do a prompt here. And you see how it's just like, yes, you're obviously going to assign this to a variable and you're going to await that thing.
That's cool. So, I do like that it's picking up those little bits of like, I get that wrong all the time where I forget to write a wait and I gotta go back. I gotta, make the function async. Like that little cleanup is really helpful.
Yeah. Like it's just smart enough to get me somewhere with that. All right, so let's do node try.mjs again, see what we get. Yes.
Yes,
ta-da.
I'm here.
All right, cool. So now we get into prompting. So let's say our prompt is going to be prompt. And this is where we're not talking about using AI to do the coding. We're talking about using AI to actually get the work done.
Right.
So there's a bunch of stuff that it's worth knowing about prompting Claude in particular. Claude was trained on a ton of XML. So it really likes XML. It's very good at dealing with things when you ask it to generate and understand XML. So that's that's kind of the way that you talk to it is you give it XML tags around stuff so that it knows what it's looking at. So in ref.json, we've got resources. So it's called links.resources. Let's say that we're going to return an object containing the transcript. And
resources would be,
yeah, there we go. Most recent episode.links.resources. Thanks. So it knows. One of the other things that I discovered when I was first testing this out is that Claude knows who you are. You specifically, Jason Lengsdorf. It knows who you are and it knows what you talk about. So even if I accidentally leave out the transcript and ask it to summarize what the most recent episode of Learn with JSON is about, it makes a pretty good guess. It's like Jason talks about Astro all the time, so I'm going to assume all of the resources in this episode are about Astro. That was the thing that it kept doing. All right.
I mean, that's not wrong.
Yeah, no, it's not. Your task is to look for resources mentioned in a YouTube transcript of the podcast Learn with Jason. Specifically, you are looking for resources that are not mentioned in the existing show notes. The transcript is in transcript tags. The existing resources are in resources tags. And we're going to iterate on this. There are a bunch of things I learned about like how this is going to work and not work. But let's give it, this is pretty close to the first thing I tried. Let show equal that, transcripts is equal to show.transcripts, and resources is equal to show.resources. That's going to give me some objects, I think.
Oh yeah, you'll have to stringify that, right?
Yeah, let's console.log what we get though first. Ooh, horrific. Okay. So we could just lazily JSON.stringify this is what we could do. And why not? That's a good start. See what we get.
Okay, stuff is happening.
I'm still trying
we commented out our response.
Yeah. Because I didn't want to waste tokens on it. All right, so now we've got all of that kind of stuff. All right, so we got the episode, we got the transcripts, and we've got at the end of this we should have the resources. Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Cool. So now we know what those look like. Let's say, let's do an edit. The transcript is an array of objects, each of which has text and offset keys. Map the array to a set of chunk tags with a text and offset tag for each one.
Interesting. Okay.
Cool.
And so, like you said, you're using XML because Claude likes XML.
Yeah, if I was using OpenAI, I would not be doing all this XML stuff because it doesn't care. All right, so, let's do this. Likewise, map this to an array of resource tags, each of which is one entry in the array. Like this is so close to I could just write this map myself, but it's still faster for me to get Claude to do it than for me to remember exactly what I was going to do. Cool. Let's comment that out so we don't get an ugly error every time we run it. Cool. So now we've got resources, and we've got transcripts, and we've got offsets. Cool. Now let's give it to the LLM. Let's see how it does.
Okay.
There's really nothing to do while it's thinking. Cool. All right. So it gives me, we're outputting the response instead of the response.text. So I'll fix that for next time. But here are some resources mentioned in the transcript that were not in the existing show notes. You mentioned Doppler, you mentioned Astro's Discord, you mentioned Astro Feed Loader, you mentioned the Notion Loader for Astro, Storyblock Loader for Astro. Does that sound right to you?
Yep.
All right. And now let's do that. Your output should be a JSON JSON array of objects with the following structure. Resource, readable name, URL to the resource. Only if you know what it is. Otherwise, false. Oh, and that was the other thing. Oops. This is so realistic because I'm making all the typos that I would usually make.
And you need a trailing comma on that, I think. If
Yeah,
you're gonna put something else down there.
Well, I don't necessarily because it can just figure that out. But the other thing I was going to do is timestamp. Timestamp in the transcript to where the resource is mentioned. Thank you.
Oh, right, because we have the offset.
We had the offset.
Right, that was the whole reason we were doing this. I can see what you mean about like getting lost in this as you're like, oh, what's it gonna do next?
Yes. What were we trying to get this thing to do? Okay, there we go. All right. So I think one of the fun things here is that it's just spit out a bunch of JSON for me because I asked it to. So
this is very cool.
So here's the thing. It's come up with a different list than it came up with last time. Why has it done that? The previous version had a bunch of other stuff.
Yep.
It's also, it's guessing what these URLs are.
Is it guessing?
Yes, it's absolutely guessing because unless you like spoke out loud what your thing was going to be. Whoops. Well, no, not Discord.
Well, that one is correct, in fact.
Where did my window go? Yes. Yeah. It knows, like I said, it knows about you. So it knows things about your show. Cool. So now let's say, I'm just going to open up a window here so that we can find this later. Oops. Okay. Let's say. Yeah, that's a good idea, Claude. Thank you. I want all of that stuff. Yes, yes. Like that. Thank you.
It's helping so much.
It's helping so much.
This is honestly, this is what gets me to turn this stuff off, is that it's like,
right.
Okay,
it doesn't always.
You've helped. Like, I'm done being helped. Please cease with the help.
Yes, it doesn't always work. Now let's say, you know what the video ID is. All right. Direct link, the YouTube link to the exact timestamp of the resource. Does it know enough about YouTube links to be able to just do that?
That would be cool. Let's find out.
There's really nothing to do while you're waiting for it to think. And there it is.
Dang. Okay, so content layer loaders.
Where did it get the video ID from?
Well, it would have been in the video, right? Like, oh,
Yeah,
that's
that's
actually a
true.
good question. Where is it pulling that from?
We we didn't get that video ID.
What video is it linking us to? That's a risky click. Is it going to rickroll us? I hope it rickrolls us.
That would be funny. This video is
okay. So just picked a rando.
Yeah, I guess it just picked a random video. Okay. Well, then let's fix that. Because we know what the video ID is.
Mm-hmm.
The ID of the video for linking to it is it show.video ID?
It's show.video. Or show.youtube.id.
Yes, that's right. Oh, right, because I didn't actually return the video. I didn't return the whole show.
Oh, right. So we should probably just give it the YouTube ID, maybe?
Yeah, YouTube. Do that. And then we'll say show.youtube, because that's what we just mapped that to.
I'll just
like,
draw
I'm part of
thinks.
And part of this is just a needless flex, right? We already know what the video is going to look like. So we could generate this.
Build that, yeah.
We could generate that link ourselves. Ta-da!
Amazing.
Oh no, unskippable ad. But it's
okay.
It is.
But here we go. So we're talking about loaders. Yeah. That is pretty dang cool. Okay. All right. I'm into this. I like this a lot because that's useful in a lot of ways, right? Like being able to identify where a resource is mentioned so you can get context about why we were talking about it. Because a lot of times if you look at the notes on an episode, there's things that seemingly have nothing to do with the episode, but they were contextually appropriate when they got shared. Right. And so being able to kind of jump in and see like, all right, what were they talking about when this actually got mentioned is, I think, a very useful just context provider.
Yep. And I hope you're getting a sense of how this thing can be useful and also where its limitations are, right?
Right.
So like it generated all of this code for me. It did some nice refactors. I didn't have to figure out in what order A and B have to go in order for sorting to happen in the right order, which I always have to do twice to get it correct. It knew about YouTube transcript already because it just knows about things that are useful. It knew that I wanted to pull in .env because it knew that I would want Anthropic's API key because it can see that I have an API key sitting there, like all of that stuff because it knows. And then again, we're talking about like what can the LLM itself do to solve code? Like we've given it a pretty short prompt here, right? We've just said, this is your task. This is what it looks like. Produce this thing, and it's spitting out some perfectly formatted JSON for us that does exactly what we wanted.
Right. This is pretty slick. I can see why this is cool. All right, I'll let me do a little celebration. But and just absolutely bog down the GPU. Okay, so there are a couple things that I thought were especially cool. Like I thought that being able to just highlight something and then Command K and say like do it different, and it showed you a diff. That to me, it's such a subtle thing, but being able to look at a diff versus having to look at the LLM output and then look at the code that I wrote and make sure that that's actually what I wanted it to do. That's a little quality of life improvement that kind of I can see why people are stoked about Cursor, because that doesn't exist in other things, right?
Right. That's basically Cursor's central innovation. Is like they have a whole model. Like when it does that diff, it's actually feeding the output of Claude to a model that they fine-tune specifically, whose job is to create diffs of things. Like that's their whole differentiator as a tool.
And so, like you said, this is really good at refactor. So if we go into this one, for example, which is currently the kind of JavaScript formatted stuff, you can just hit Command K and say like make this JSON, and it'll just do it, right?
Oh, that's a great idea. This isn't valid JSON. Can you fix it, please?
Always good to be polite to the robots. Like this is something that I say that as a joke, but I'm definitely not joking. Like I'm always when I talk to Siri, please and thank you.
Yeah. Look, there we go. It fixed the JSON for it.
That's great. Okay. This sort of stuff is really where it starts to feel worth the price of admission, because I have burned so much time on just like quickly formatting stuff. I copy paste something from the web and I need to clean up a bunch of like carriage returns, or I need to go correct a bunch of like the smart quotes that I need to be not smart quotes because I copy pasted code off of a website, right? Stuff like that it burns a lot of time. So being able to highlight it and say, hey, can you remove the smart quotes that's that little stuff that just burns hours over the course of the average week.
Yeah. So do you want to try a flex? Do we have time?
We got like 10 minutes.
All right. Let's see if this works. This is more of a chat problem. My biggest beef with Cursor is that I never know when I should be doing Command K or when I should be doing Command L, like whether the thing that I'm asking for is large enough that it thinks of it as a chat problem. This currently works for only the latest episode. Please refactor it so that it fetches the transcript for all of the episodes. No, that's not. That's just going to be a lot.
That's going to burn your entire budget for the year on AI.
For the most recent 10 episodes, make sure to do it in parallel.
Do it in parallel. Get sorted episodes. So it's all right. So we're popping through here.
Yeah. So what I'm just going to do is I'm just going to hit apply, and we'll look at the diff rather than looking at what it said in the chat. Mm-hmm. So this is now, instead of fetching most recent transcript, it says it fetches transcript of episode. Recent episodes, a slice of 10. That's good. Then it says promise.all transcript promises. All right. This is the
await.
Yeah, this is the in parallel that I was talking about. Mm-hmm. So now it fetches the most recent fetch recent transcripts, and then for let show of shows, it does that. All right, that's good. That's close.
And then it's I got it. Okay.
For let show of shows so that would work. That has done the episode fetching in parallel. So let's say also do the prompting and retrieval in parallel and combine the results into a single JSON object. So now it's doing shows.map.
Cool. Okay. All right. I'm seeing the benefits here.
So I could run that now and it'll probably not work first try. But let's just see. But you can tell even if we haven't got there, it has got me a lot closer, and it did that whole parallelization stuff in like 10 seconds, right? It was as fast as I thought about it, is how fast it did it.
Doesn't like
Unexpected
the
token. Here are the debug with
line
AI.
95.
It's a syntax error. We're trying to parse JSON. The response you're trying to parse is not valid JSON.
Oh, because it's returning back like here are the resources, and so we need to tell it like only return the JSON and return nothing else.
Yes, you are correct. Thank you.
Yeah, we're getting structured output would solve this.
Your response should only be JSON with no preamble or markdown tags.
And this kind of stuff is, I think, where it starts to become like a skill set, knowing how to get the LLM to not do the stuff that is helpful when you're building, but not helpful when you're trying to use it as like part of a coding pipeline.
Exactly. And also the frontier models are being specifically trained on this, right? Like they are not just automatically good at outputting JSON. Like that is one of the big jumps that they've made in recent releases is like they, in the release notes, they're like, you keep asking us to just generate JSON. And so we've trained it specially to do that.
It's very, very interesting.
Yeah. So I think it's doing 10 episodes. I think we can, if we wanted to wait 10 times as long as we were waiting before, it would get the right answer. But
yeah, I mean, this is super cool. So while we're waiting for that to complete, let's talk a little bit about sort of next steps for people who want to learn more. And so I'm going to actually flip over into this window. So the big things that we talked about today was like cursor itself. So that's the IDE you were using all day. Were you using any plugins or any specific pieces of it, or that's just like that's how it works?
That's how it works. The thing that does diffs costs $20 a month. So
$20 a month. Okay. Right. So it's not a free tool.
It's not completely free.
Got it. And
because it's making tons of LLM calls for you, obviously, right? Like it's costing them money. Right. So
cool. Yeah, and that makes sense. So if you don't have if you're paying for a different like AI thing to do coding instead of paying for like ChatGPT directly, you could theoretically switch to this and then have access to do your coding through your IDE, which, yeah, anyways, it now it's sort of interesting because now we're paying for the same AI models in multiple different places. Like you can get it in your apps, you can get it in your IDEs, you can get it in websites. So figuring out where you're actually using it is probably a really important part of triaging your AI costs.
Absolutely.
Oh, actually, this is a good point. So it's $20 a month plus API usage. So you got to put in your own key.
So yeah, what I did is you don't have to put in your own key. They will just charge you if you go over a certain amount of usage. They'll charge you by how many tokens you're using. What I did is I'm already paying for Claude, so I put in my Claude key. And then they don't. If you put in your own key, they don't charge you anything extra. But like you have to pay for the diff engine.
Right. Okay, cool. So let me throw another link to your stuff on here. Anything else that I should be linking to that I'm not?
Llama Index.
Okay, Llama Index. And that is what we used to pull in that Anthropic model. And so I see people talk about Llama Index, and I also see people talk about Ollama. Are those different things?
Those are different things. Yeah.
Okay.
We work together really well with them. The Ollama people, we're big fans of them, and vice versa. Ollama is a way of running local LLM models, but Llama Index is an open source framework. They're very different things.
Got it. Okay. I love, I mean, I love that like different animals sort of get their spotlight. Like llamas in the AI community are like there's a lot of like llama puns and stuff. And then,
So
there's,
this might or might not be obvious, but if you take the word LLM and you add vowels to it, you get llama. That's why everybody keeps using llamas for things.
it was not obvious. It's very obvious now. Cool. All right. Well, that's one of those ones that now that I see it, I'm like, oh, yeah, okay, that explains everything.
Yeah, that's why everybody keeps picking llamas. That's why Meta has a thing called llama, and we are llama index, and they are olama. Everybody's doing the same.
Got it.
Everybody's doing the same pun.
Love it. I love it. This is great. Like I love, I really do appreciate you taking the time on this because I feel like I have been dragging my feet on this stuff, not necessarily because I don't like it, but because it's been hard for me to understand how it fits, right? And so that getting a guided tour, did it finish?
It finished, but it it ran into rate limits, so it stopped.
Oh, well, that makes sense. Yeah, it is. I think each of my transcripts, because they're 90 minutes long, is like 1.5 megabytes. So we did just throw a ton of data at the
Yeah.
at the LLM.
It's a good thing I didn't do it with every episode. Otherwise,
Oh my
otherwise
goodness.
Claude would be like, "No, you're never allowed to use Claude again."
All right. So let's see. With that, we are approaching the end here. So is there anything else that we didn't link to that we didn't talk about? Any getting started materials or next steps for people who want to learn more about this stuff?
So, I mean, obviously, I spend a ton of time writing the actual documentation of Llama Index. So I think it's a really great place to get started with doing this kind of thing. So that's where I would send people docs.llamaindex.ai. That's in Python. We've been using the TypeScript version, which is ts.llamaindex.ai.
Okay. Actually, I feel like everybody's going to be like this. This is definitely the JavaScript crowd here, I think.
Yeah, I agree.
If I'm wrong, Python fans stand up. But I don't think I'm wrong. But so this is great. We'll make sure this shows up in the notes, and then we also have there are additional docs. Okay. So this is great. We've got we linked to Cursor. We threw a link to you in there, yes. And let me do one more shout out to our captioner. We've had Vanessa here all day. Thank you so much, Vanessa, for being here. We have that's White Coat Captioning. That's sponsored by Netlify. Thank you, Netlify. And we've been using Tuple all day, which is why I've been able to just draw all over Laurie's screen all day. Thank you to Tuple for sponsoring the show and making that possible. And this little app I'm very happy with. Let's ship it. So it's so
Nice.
silly. It's so silly, and it brings me so much joy. But with that being said, Laurie, any parting words before we wrap this one up?
No, I think I've achieved my mission here, which was to show you that AI can do the boring stuff, and it makes you go faster, and that's really, really great.
Yeah, I will agree. It this got me further down the road of maybe trying to figure out how to use this stuff for real, because it was the first time that I've seen it in a way that didn't feel like it was kind of intensely in the way. So thank you very much for that. I hope y'all had a good time learning about this stuff, because I definitely am leaving with a lot to think about. Go check out those links. Go check out Laurie online, and I think. While you're checking things out, go check out what's coming up on the site, because we've got just a heck of a show coming up. We're going to do native apps on Tori, which is a Rust framework, but we're not going to write any Rust. So I'm really excited about this, because every time somebody tells me about one of these, I get really excited. And I haven't yet found one that really feels like it fits, but Tori seems like it's got a lot of promise. We've got Matt Pocock coming on and teach us about TypeScript generics. I'm really excited about that. Bree is going to come on and try to change my mind on Tailwind. I don't think it's going to work, but I'm excited to learn. And we've got a lot more coming up that I haven't talked about yet. So this is going to be a whole lot of fun. Make sure you get on the Learn with Jason Discord, subscribe on YouTube, hit the like button on everything. Thank you all very much for being here. and we will see you next time. Thanks, y'all.